So I'm Rachael Marjamaa, and my residency took place in Philipsburg, Montana. I also live here, so a lot of these paintings that I created for the residency are a little personal to me. Since moving back home to Montana, a lot of change has happened, a lot of new buildings have gone up, and it's been a little scary, so I wanted to capture some of those areas that I know are going to change here soon. This is an area where the senior center is going to go in. There used to be 2 trailers in that little valley, and I think the tree's going down and the barn is going down as well. But it's for a good cause, but I just kind of wanted to capture that transitional area that the town is going through right now. I included some chickens. Those are my cousin's chickens that are always in that area, and a little cat. I really love when lawns are wild because it's really good for our natural pollinators, so I always try and pull that into my work, having a wild lawn or taking care of our little creatures because they take care of us in the grand scheme of things. Another painting I made for the residency was a bee with blackberries. There's a big population of honeybees around this area because Montana is a very great place to raise bees. Not as many pesticides are used, not as many sterile lawns. So I included just a little tiny honeybee with some blackberries for my grandma. Let's see. Speaking of my grandma, she was a really strong lady, and she always had a little bottle of blackberry brandy with her. She grew up around Philipsburg, came here, built a house here, and whenever one of us were feeling ill, she would always make tea with blackberry brandy, so that's why I included those. She also used to keep rabbits, so I created a painting of just some of her little rabbits that she kept. There's so many fun little stories about her in this area. My mom said whenever she wanted the rabbits to go back into their kennels for the night, she would just tell the kids to go to bed and they would automatically go back into the kennels. So she's a really smart woman, really strong woman. For this piece, I got a garden going this year, but I got so busy that I wasn't able to really deer-proof it, so I painted a garden for myself instead. So here I've got a little deer, and even if they're plants that the deer don't like in Philipsburg, everybody has a story about how one goes by and just munches the heads off of flowers. So I just wanted to include that, just because I couldn't keep a garden this year. So next thing I have are some of the sweaters that I created out of locally sourced fibers from Philipsburg. Everything you see here, the fiber was sourced within an 80-mile radius, and I either got that fiber from the Sugarloaf wool carding factory down in Hall, Montana, or I processed the wool myself. I went to ranches and picked up raw fleeces and washed them, picked all the straw out of them and spun them up. And I really wanted to feature just the beautiful range of colors you can get from a small area, especially with clothing. It can have a massive carbon footprint just from being shipped to a place to get processed, shipped to another place to get sewn, shipped to another place to get sold. That's a lot of gas, a lot of water, and a lot of resources. So I just wanted to show what was possible in keeping everything very local. So both of these sweaters, I created the motif myself. I'm very inspired by Icelandic wool lopi sweaters, and I really enjoy including little ornate baubles on them. All of this is hand spun, and then this sweater was recreated from a sweater that I had scrapped out from the thrift store that had a bunch of moth holes in it. So I repurposed that wool because it was still a really beautiful resource. So yeah, that's a feature of all of the wools you can find in Philipsburg. Most of it is merino wool, some of it is hybridine, Shropshire, some specialty breeds, and then also breeds that weren't necessarily made for making beautiful fleeces to wear, but their wool is still very useful. I created some sock patterns inspired by some of the buildings you see on Broadway. This one is replicating the Sapphire Gallery brick motif that you see. And this one is the Kaiser House building right next to the brewery. I really love the old structures in the old buildings here. And it's just really wonderful that that was preserved. So here I have a little setup of all of the natural fibers you can find in Philipsburg, and I just wanted to show a couple of the different stages that wool goes through. Here you can see some fleeces. They are washed and very nice. They're not dirty, so we skipped a step, but I didn't want to bring a dirty fleece in here. But they start out as really curly locks, and they get sent through a drum carder once they're dry to be turned into roving. And this roving is brushed all in one single direction, so when I spin it on my spinning wheel, it just easily pulls apart, and I can put that twist in it to then make a single ply yarn. This is an example of a couple single ply yarns that I have spun up onto bobbins. Right now these are waiting to be plied, so I will take two of these together and spin it in the opposite direction to relieve that twist, and that then makes a double ply yarn. And after many hours of work and labor and water, you get something that looks like this, and it's ready to be knit up into a sweater, a pair of socks, or a shawl. The next thing I like to create are traditional Finnish himli. You can see this art form all over Northern Europe. And basically these are straw moldals held together by string, and they're very fragile. And I think that's a really good example of the community here in Philipsburg. A bunch of different people came together to save this town from being a ghost town, and they support one another. With himli, the more pieces of straw you use, and the shorter they are, the stronger the structure is, but it's still very fragile. And all of this is created just out of straw that I find outside in my yard. It takes about a year to make, just because you have to grow the straw, you have to dry it out, you have to cut it up. You can purchase it wholesale, but it's a little expensive. But yeah, it's a really fun art form, and I really enjoy it. In Finland, after your straw harvest, you would create these big mobiles and put them over your dinner table, and the larger structures you had, the better your rye harvest would be for the next year. So I think that's a really fun tradition to pass on and think about.